You've tried the things you were supposed to try earlier nights. Less screen time, a weekend with nothing scheduled. Maybe a vacation that was supposed to reset everything and left you more anxious than before you left. And the thing nobody said out loud, the thing this video is going to say, is that those solutions didn't fail because you failed. They failed because they were designed for a different problem, not a harder version of your problem. A different one entirely. Stress and burnout are not the same thing. Most people treat them like they are. Same vocabulary, same advice, same assumption that if you just rest more, the system resets. But they work through different mechanisms. And when you apply stress tools to a burnout state, you don't get recovery. You get more of the same emptiness, plus the guilt of having tried and still not gotten better. That's what this video is about. Not a vocabulary lesson, a mechanism explanation. Because once you understand how these two things actually differ, what's happening inside your body in each state, the reason nothing has worked is going to become very clear. And what to do next will finally make sense. Let's start with stress, because stress is the one most people actually understand, even if they don't know they understand it. Stress is a load state. Your nervous system encounters something that requires more than baseline. A deadline, a conflict, a demand, a threat, and it activates. Cortisol rises. Adrenaline moves through the system. Heart rate increases. Attention narrows. The body is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Prepare you to meet the thing in front of you. That's the part most people know. Here's the part that matters. Stress, in its basic form, is not damage. It's activation. The system is running. Running hot, running hard, but running. The engine is on. The resources are there. What stress costs is energy. Sustained stress costs a lot of energy. And if the activation never fully switches off, if the demands keep coming before the system can discharge, then the cost starts to compound. Research on the stress response is actually consistent here. The problem isn't that the system activates. The problem is that it doesn't get the signal to come back down. Cortisol stays elevated. The nervous system stays primed. Sleep becomes lighter. Recovery becomes less complete. And the person wakes up already a little more depleted than they were the day before. This is the stress portrait. Too much, too long, no full discharge. And here's why that matters. When stress looks like this, when it's the engine running hot, the interventions that work are exactly what you'd expect. Reduce the load. Increase genuine recovery time. Give the system what it needs to come back to baseline. Rest, in a stress state, works. The system is designed for it. It's waiting to use it. But something different happens when the system runs like that for long enough, months, sometimes years, without enough real recovery in between. Something shifts. And when it does, rest stops working the way it should. That shift has a name. Burnout is not stress that got worse. That's the misunderstanding this entire video is built to correct. Burnout is what happens on the other side of prolonged stress, after the system has been running hot for long enough that it stops running the way it used to. Here's the physiological picture. Under chronic, sustained overload, the kind that doesn't discharge, the kind that compounds over months, the stress response system starts to change. Not temporarily. Structurally, the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system, the central loop that regulates your cortisol, starts to dysregulate. And, in many documented burnout cases, what researchers find isn't elevated cortisol, it's flattened cortisol. The system that was supposed to help you respond to demands has been running for so long that it's lost its range. And when cortisol flattens, something else follows. The dopamine system, which governs motivation, anticipation, the feeling of wanting anything, loses its signal clarity. Things that used to feel like they mattered stop registering, not because you stopped caring, because the neurochemical infrastructure of caring has been running on a deficit for a very long time. This is what burnout feels like from the inside. Not overwhelmed. Empty. Not too much. Too little feeling, too little motivation, too little of the sense that anything is real. You sit down to do the thing you used to love, and there is nothing there. Not resistance, just absence. You finish the day and wait for relief, and it doesn't come. Not because the day was bad, because the mechanism that registers relief has stopped responding. High functioning doesn't mean fine, and this is the moment the vocabulary starts to matter enormously. Because if what you have is burnout, if your system is in this flattened, depleted, absent state, then the tools designed for stress are not just insufficient. In some cases, they actively make it worse. Here's the distinction that changes everything. Stress is the engine running too hot. Burnout is the engine that stopped. You do not fix a stopped engine by telling it to slow down. You do not restore a flattened system by removing demands and waiting for it to bounce back. Because the problem isn't the load. Not anymore. The problem is the system's capacity to respond. Think about what happens when someone in burnout takes a vacation. They're supposed to rest. They know they need to rest. They've cleared their schedule, removed the obligations, created every external condition for recovery, and they feel worse. Not ungrateful, not lazy, worse. Because in a burnout state, stillness doesn't register as safety. The nervous system has been running a low-grade threat response for so long that it has relearned what normal feels like. And normal now feels like movement, productivity, forward motion. Stillness triggers the system, not calms it. The rest makes it worse experience isn't a character flaw. It's the physiological signature of a system that has lost its ability to discharge through rest. And the advice, rest more, slow down, take a break, lands in a system that can no longer use it that way. So it doesn't produce recovery. It produces guilt. This is why nothing held. Not the sleep hygiene, not the weekend off, not the vacation you came home from feeling vaguely worse than when you left. You were applying stress tools to a burnout state. The tools were real. The effort was real. The problem was the match between the tool and the mechanism. You were not failing at recovery. You were recovering from the wrong thing. That single sentence, let it land for a moment. Because it carries something that most burnout content never offers. A complete, non-moral explanation for the failure of real effort. Your nervous system doesn't know you're safe yet. It's been running a threat response for months, possibly years. The fact that rest doesn't feel restful isn't a personal failure. It's a physiological pattern. And physiological patterns, unlike character flaws, can be changed. Your body already knows something is wrong. This video is just giving it a name that isn't weakness. If this distinction landed, if some part of you is now asking, but which one do I actually have? That question deserves a precise answer. There's a 5-minute honest assessment in the description that moves through the specific markers, not a quiz, a diagnostic map, and gives you a clear picture of where you are and what that means for what to do next. No shame in the results, just clarity. So what changes now that you have this distinction? If what you're carrying is stress, if the engine is running hot and hasn't stopped yet, the standard advice is real. Use it. Sleep. Reduce input. Create genuine space between demand cycles. The system is waiting to recover. Let it. But if what you're carrying is burnout, if the picture in this video is closer to what you recognize, then the approach is different. And it has to be different. Recovery from burnout is not about doing less. It's about doing differently and with dramatically lower expectations of how quickly the system responds. Burnout recovery doesn't reward urgency. It doesn't reward effort in the way the system you built did. In fact, the performance orientation, the instinct to approach recovery the same way you approach the work that caused the collapse, is one of the primary obstacles to actual recovery. The nervous system doesn't recover faster because you're trying harder. What it responds to is the slow, repeated experience of demand removal. Not a weekend, not a vacation. A sustained change in the signal the body receives over weeks, sometimes months, that something has genuinely shifted. This is not what most people want to hear. And it's not said here to be discouraging. It's said because the people who recover from burnout, who actually get the system back online, are the ones who stopped applying the wrong timeline to a process that has its own. One thing that consistently appears in burnout recovery research: the pace of recovery is almost always slower than the person expects, and the recovery attempts that fail are almost always the ones that imported the performance logic, the urgency, the benchmarks, the expectation of measurable progress into a process that doesn't run on those terms. Not yet is a complete sentence. You don't have to be further along. You don't have to have figured out which category you're in before you're allowed to start treating yourself differently. You just have to know that the tools you've been using were built for a different problem, and that there are tools built for yours. You're not failing to recover, you've been using the wrong map, and now you have a better one. If you want to know precisely where you are, stress, burnout, or somewhere in between, the assessment in the description was built for exactly this moment. 5 minutes. No performance required. Link in the description and the pinned comment. What happened when you tried the standard advice? More rest, a vacation, reducing your load, and it didn't hold. What did that feel like? Here's what this video was actually about. Not a vocabulary lesson, not a clinical framework. It was about the specific kind of confusion that keeps real people applying real effort to the wrong thing and experiencing the failure as evidence of their own weakness. You were not weak. You were solving the wrong equation. Stress and burnout look similar from the outside. Both of them show up as a person who is tired and struggling, but they work through different mechanisms. They need different things. And when you apply a stress solution to a burnout state, the system doesn't get better. It gets quieter, flatter, more convinced that there is no version of rest that actually works for it. Your nervous system doesn't know you're safe yet. It's been running a threat response for months, possibly years. The fact that rest doesn't feel restful isn't a personal failure. It's a physiological pattern. And physiological patterns, unlike character flaws, can be changed. Slowly, imperfectly, without an audience, but changed. What the distinction between stress and burnout gives you isn't a diagnosis. It isn't a plan. It's something smaller and, in some ways, more important. A reason for the failure that doesn't belong to you. The tools didn't hold because they weren't built for this. You weren't failing at recovery. You were recovering from the wrong thing. And now, even slightly, even just in this moment, you have a better map. One small thing. No audience. Whenever you're ready.